Good morning and welcome to another episode of Future Media Explains. Now, it's likely that this morning you got the same email I did in your inbox. This one. It's from Google and it's telling you very politely that it's updating personalized recommendations across Google search. And on first glance, it reads like housekeeping, but really it isn't. It's a signal about the new and emerging web that Google's trying to build. And it's the tip of a giant iceberg that reveals how Google's trying to turn AI into hard cash by changing the way that 5 billion of us find information and transact on the web. So it's big, really big, and the insights in here are invaluable for every digital publisher. The levers forcing this change are the rapid public adoption of AI, which has been faster than any digital technology before it, a revolution in content personalization that new tech is enabling, and an unprecedented global effort by governments all over the world to rein in big tech's monopolies. All of these are colliding. And the first signal I got that this was on its way came unexpectedly during a podcast I did with South Africa's competition regulators in the final days leading up to Christmas last year. They had extracted what seemed then an astonishing concession from Google. It was going to allow South African users to choose the publishers they wanted to prioritize in search results. Literally, Google was going to change its cash cow search product for the first time ever in response to regulatory pressure. 6 months later, and the echo of that decision is landing in your inbox. And the inbox is 5 billion people globally. So today, in this latest episode of Future Media Explains, I'm going to cover what Google's actually announced. I'm going to do a walkthrough of how it works. I'm going to share why Google's doing this and why it's doing it right now, the advertising motive that sits beneath it, how South Africa's hidden hand helped influence it, and what it means for publishers and the future of our digital experiences. So you ready? Let's go. The first rule of reading anything big tech sends out is to read the words closely and then look at the order of those words. Google says in here that it's giving you more control over personalized recommendations. That's a generous interpretation. Let's look at the product list and the order in which Google wrote it. Search, maps, shopping, hotels, flights, then translate, and then last, news. That order isn't an accident, it's a P&L statement, because here are the numbers. Alphabet's total revenue, Alphabet being the mother group, total revenue last year passed $400 billion for the first time, and $292 billion of that, 73 cents in every dollar, came from advertising. And the biggest engine inside that advertising machine was search. So when Google chooses to reorder how search works, it's performing open heart surgery on the most profitable advertising business ever built. So it has to really mean it. Now consider what personalisation does to each product on that list. Shopping. Tell Google your preferences and it will route you into the shopping experiences that Google monetizes directly. Hotels and flights, it's the same. Google will operate the booking funnel and AI overviews will hand you straight to them. Maps is the local business growth engine. It's where businesses pay to be found. And since AI overviews started answering questions on the results page, Google doesn't just index the conversation, it controls the conversation. The more you tell it about yourself, the more precisely it places a paid product into that conversation. Translate, yeah, it's a must-have utility, and then news, mentioned last. But here's the twist. News might be listed last, but news was the first consideration. And these changes exist because of news. And the trail for that, as I said earlier, starts in South Africa. In late 2023, South Africa's Competition Commission launched the Media and Digital Platforms Market Inquiry. 24 months, 5 rounds of information requests, public hearings where the platforms had to sit in the room and answer. And then in December, I had the 2 architects of that inquiry on the Future Media podcast. James Hodge, the Competition Commission's chief economist who chaired it, and Paula Fray, the media expert on the inquiry. And what made this inquiry different from every other attempt worldwide is that it wasn't really about money. It was about the constitution. It was about South Africa's culture. You see, South Africa has 12 official languages, and they're not a decoration, they're the architecture of the country's identity. And yet, when the inquiry looked under the hood, Google's search supported only three of them: English, isiZulu, and Afrikaans. 8 constitutionally protected languages simply didn't exist in search. Then the inquiry demanded data. It wanted impressions and click-through rates from Google itself under formal information powers, and this is what they found. The numbers were stark. Almost half of all news queries from South Africans were redirected to foreign news brands, and mainly American news brands. And those links to those foreign outlets were 60% less likely to get a click than links to South African publishers. Google was systematically serving people the news they didn't want and burying the news they did, not out of malice, but out of the old search mechanics. And then the Commission did something genuinely clever, in my opinion. Every platform's defense in every jurisdiction has kind of been the same. Everything we do is responding to consumer preferences. So the South Africans turned that argument into a weapon. Checkmate. Google couldn't claim that it was serving users while its own click data proved that it wasn't. So a remedy was needed, and Google wouldn't build its entire algorithm, but instead it would offer something else: preferred sources. And here it is today, the feature announced in this morning's email, offered up as a regulatory remedy in Johannesburg. Now look at this timeline, because this is moving incredibly fast. You see, Google had been quietly trialing preferred sources in its search labs and releasing it only to a handful of people in the US and India, and only in English. Then, South Africa's final report landed in November 2025, and Google made a commitment to bring the feature to South Africa early as a fix, with a funded marketing campaign to make sure people actually used it. Then, weeks later, Google announced the global rollout, and by the end of April this year, it was live in every supported language and market. 2 weeks ago, Google extended preferred sources into AI overviews and into AI mode, prioritizing the AI answers themselves. And the sources that you choose now shape what the machine says to you, badged preferred, inside the response. This morning's email is the consumer-facing wrapper around all of that, and the early data is striking. Google is backing what South Africa originally argued, that people are twice as likely to click through to a preferred source, and that users have already selected more than 345,000 unique sources. So for the first time in a quarter of a century of search, since its dawn, you, the reader, get a choice. You get a hand on the dial. If you subscribe to 8 publishers you trust, you can tell Google, tell me and show me the news from these first. I set mine up just now. The Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times, the Washington Post, the Verge, New York Times, and a handful of others. The interface, yeah, it's pretty clunky, but it works. And your results become, in part, your editorial decision. So the remedy designed to save Afrikaans language journalism in Johannesburg is now reshaping search results in Sydney, Sao Paulo, and Stockholm. That's kind of how regulation works in 2026, and South Africa wrote a most favoured nations clause into its deal to make sure that it keeps working, that anything big tech concedes anywhere in the world must now be offered there too. So far so good, or is it? Why did Google really agree to those changes in South Africa? Let me give you my reading. First, it's cynical, and then it's structural, but both are true, I think. The cynical reading is that this was regulatory insurance. This is the most intense regulatory period that Google has ever faced. Antitrust convictions in the US, ad tech remedies looming, inquiries from Brussels to Canberra. So handing users a personalisation dial was the cheapest concession available, and it photographs really well in a courtroom and effectively costs nothing structural. But the structural reading is more interesting. News was always worth more to Google than Google has ever admitted. For years, Google's line has been that news barely matters to its business, it barely registers on its revenue. But the inquiry tested that claim. With Google's own data extracted under South Africa's legal information powers, it discovered that 1 in 5 searches touched news content, and the dependency was as old as Google itself. Okay. And so when you said that you'd done your inquiry and you got data about, how much news consumption there was on Google, did that come from them? Did they volunteer it? Or did you need to poll the community for that data? Did you ask Google for it?
Yeah, we asked Google for that information. So we have powers of information request in a market inquiry and can even summons if there's not cooperation. So a lot of the importance of that evidence gathering is evident in sort of coming out with a sort of value assessment for Google. So, and what we try to do in the report as well is not redact things, but provide data ranges to help people even beyond South Africa to really understand the value of news. So to protect confidentiality, we can't give the exact number, but for instance, in Google, it was between 5 and 10% of all queries raised top stories.
And this is why news drives habits. Habit drives queries. Queries drive Google's ad auction, and the ad auction drives its $292 billion in ad revenue. A happy user is an engaged user, and an engaged user is a better advertising target. So when you hand Google your source preferences, your travel intentions, and your shopping tastes, you're not just curating your experience, you're completing Google's picture of you. You're doing the targeting work yourself, voluntarily, and it's disguised as control. Meanwhile, here's what's happening to the people who make the news that drive 1 in 10 of those queries. The inquiry's economists proved that programmatic advertising and Meanwhile, here's what happened to the people who make the news. The inquiry's economists proved that with programmatic advertising, publisher CPMs had collapsed 90%, from around $7 to 70 cents. One witness summed up 30 years of digital publishing in one sentence. What had been millions of dollars for thousands of views had become thousands of dollars for millions of views. And that's the whole story of the open web's advertising economy in one line, delivered under oath. And remember the order of that product list in Google's mail today: search, maps, shopping, hotels, flights. All you need to do is follow the money and then read the press release. So it's about the money, and perhaps that's not a surprise, but this might be, because preferred sources is the visible edge of something much larger. For 20 years, personalisation has meant a ranking algorithm making guesses about you based on your clicks. Crude, passive, kind of a one-size-fits-all with the edges sanded off. But all that changes with AI. Generative AI doesn't rank an experience for you, it manufactures one. And AI Overviews doesn't choose which 10 links you see, it composes the answer in real time for an audience of 1. In your language, at your reading level, with your sources based on your history. That is the era of hyper-personalization. Every digital surface assembled fresh, per person, in the moment. Your search results page becomes a publication with a circulation of 1. Your shopping journey is a storefront built only for you. Your news brief, your travel itinerary, your kids' homework help, all of it generated, all of it individual, all of it shaped by an AI that remembers what you told it yesterday. AI overviews are already on 80%, 4 in 5 of the most valuable searches for all the world's publishers, and traffic to those publishers is cratered by 40% and more. That's the stakes of hyper-personalization that Google's looking at now. If every experience is manufactured per person, the question then of whose content, whose language, whose facts, whose culture feeds that machine becomes the question about who exists or that decides who exists in the digital world at all. And for publishers, this cuts two ways. First, the threat is that platforms now steal the relationship with the readers as well as the clicks and the ads. That's probably happening already. The opportunity, though, is that preferred sources might be the first mechanism of the AI era where reader loyalty is a ranking signal. Maybe trust becomes infrastructure. And the publishers who win the next decade might be the ones whose readers care enough to type their name into a preferences box. Brand is no longer marketing. Your brand is what decides whether you even get distribution. And that's certainly not the open web, is it? That's Google's web. And so the ramifications for this are simply enormous. So let's land this. Google sent you that email this morning because it wants you to engage more with the sources you trust in languages you speak, because it makes them more money. And it's an effective heat shield against regulation, but it also fuels Google's next generation of advertising by having you validate what you want voluntarily, and Google's ad monopoly can run even hotter. You see, AI is turning personalisation into the operating system for a new AI ad-funded web. Not a worldwide web, but a web for one. And on one hand, I actually welcome it. It's a tool against the rising tide of synthetic junk content we're seeing all over the web. It also lets quality publishers convert loyalty into visibility, and it gives readers, you, a measure of agency over what you see for the first time. But I would urge you to keep reading the words closely and keep looking at the order Google gives them to you in. You see, publishers are rushing to adopt this. I'm seeing preferred sources badges appearing on some of the world's largest mastheads already. And we've seen Google News and then Discover and now this. We must by now know that all of this is designed for Google's benefit. But maybe you'll give it a go. Maybe you're happy with AI overviews. Certainly, Google's pushing ahead regardless, at least until the regulators decide to break them up. But my takeaway from all this is that perhaps the fastest emerging business case for monetizing AI is becoming visible. It has the power to turbocharge personalization, meaning brands and publishers can talk to people one-to-one like they've never been able to before. Google is betting that advertising is the way to monetize that. I can't wait to see what publishers come up with. Thanks for listening. That's been Future Media Explains on why Google is personalizing search. I hope it's been helpful, and I'll see you next time.